think it's interesting that a book like this has come out, because books do have a very strong role in terms of influencing thinking. I'm reminded of one of the early 20th century books that really looked at changing habits and changing habits of thinking, which was the famous American visionary Mr. Fuller wrote a book in 1969, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. So I'm reminded very much of the idea of a manual being something that can help us chart our journeys. And essentially, this is another stab, I think, at charting a journey. In between, in the early 1980s, Charles Correa wrote a book called The New Landscape, which I won't take a show of hands, but I hope that if you haven't read it, then you should read it, because it's one of, he was not only a student of Buckminster Fuller, but also one of the people who has shaped a lot of thinking on urbanism in our country and continues to shape that. Not to forget that he was chairman of the National Commission on Urbanization, which brought out its report in 1988, and till date is one of the key documents in the history of urban thinking and urban thought and urbanism in our country. And I think this book now adds to that kind of a collection of wonderful writings, which essentially target, I think, two things. One is to recognize individual endeavor, the ways in which individuals themselves, families, communities can actually contribute to a much larger transformational kind of change. And that transformation is something that we revisit every few decades to take another stab at how to transform, right? And I think it's only the brave-hearted that go into this territory of really coming out with solutions and with a palette of options. I'm reminded of where I was on Monday and Tuesday at a meeting of the United Cities and Local Governments. There were about 14 mayors there. We were all talking about the SDGs and how SDGs are going to affect cities in transition, what they were calling secondary cities, or cities which seem to be in that gray area between the village and the metropolis. And it's these cities that are going to form the real challenge to all our infrastructure and our resources, because these are largely unregulated, not planned very well, play a very transitional kind of role between metropolis and village. It's where a lot of the first step of migration takes place, and then people jump from there to the metropolis, because the metropolis seems to be what's driving all the urbanization. The World Bank has talked about mega urban regions. Now, in terms of resource use, all of this is an enormous burden, and the demand is only growing exponentially. So we are faced with a tremendous challenge. And how do we battle this challenge? And I think what Mr. Butt's book reinforces is, interestingly, the one global consensus that seems to be emerging, which is participation. Everybody, every one of the 14 municipalities from 6 continents who were there at this meeting, as well as organizations that support their work, everyone was talking participation. So it seems to be a growing consensus globally that unless we anchor our work in the community, in the family, and with the individual, then there is really no hope. So therefore, for me, the context is, again, it's an operating manual for spaceship Earth. Yet again, almost 50 years after that book was written. It helps us in the Indian context to understand how individuals and communities can contribute, and how governments can reach out to individuals and communities to actually be the game changers, change the habits that ultimately are doing us a great disservice. It's really very bad living habits at the end of the day that seem to account for a lot of the wastage, the theft, the inequity of access. All of this seems to be just accounted by surmountable social and cultural phenomena. And I think that's that seems always to be a very soft issue with urban sector guys and girls who like to talk infrastructure networks and plumbing and STPs and so on. Whereas Mr. Bhatt is really saying, look, decentralize this, really get into the community, see what is the right-sized option. So there's another book that one recalls, which is E.F. Schumacher's Small is Beautiful. So again, the idea that your first line of attack need not be mega, it needs to be micro. And so I think the book and its approach really embodies much of the wisdom that has now been absorbed into development thinking, and a lot of that is now being applied to cities. Cities are sort of late comers in this whole dialogue about resource use and resource allocation. So I think it's a very welcome initiative by Taru and the Rockefeller Foundation and the author who has braved the whole sector in some sense to really talk about some